welcome back to the 8th concession. My name is Natalie. It's a dreary February day. That was my dog sighing. Even he feels it. It's one of those days where I really want some comfort food to just feel cozy and warm. It's mild out, very mild for Ontario, but it's still damp and dreary and overcast. So today I am going to make something that I grew up with, that was a recipe from my mother and from her mother before her, and that's Hungarian goulash. Now, when I say goulash to some people, they think of like a tomato-based dish, or somehow there's tomatoes in it. But the Hungarian goulash that my mother and my grandmother, my Oma, used to make has no tomatoes at all. It is basically a simmered beef stew that you serve over potatoes or rice or even noodles. There are no vegetables in it other than onions. It's really just a rich beef and gravy dish served over some starch, and then you can add vegetables on the side. But it is so warm and comforting that that's what I'm going to make today. The trick to this dish isn't that it's difficult. The trick is time. Because you're using stew beef, which tends to be a little bit tough, letting it simmer for a long period of time is what makes it so rich and tender. So I'm putting it on now in the afternoon. It's about 2:30, and that's for supper because I want it to just sit and simmer for a long time. Now, to start, the ingredients are simple. A package of stew beef, about a pound. And my grandmother used to always say you had to have as many onions as meat. Now, I don't put that many onions in, but you don't have to be afraid if you're an onion lover to put lots of chopped onions in. I'm going to use about one medium size, and then I have a little bit more leftover onion from another meal. So let's just say a medium onion, and then some spices. Now, the spices I use is this mix. I didn't come up with this recipe. I believe it has the name rustic rub. I got it from my parents who mix it up all the time. Truly, it's just a mixture of spices you would have in your pantry. Now, Hungarian goulash does need paprika, and this mix has a good amount of paprika in it. So in here is paprika, cayenne, salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, and I think some oregano. And that's all that is. So I'm going to use this to season the meat, and I'm going to brown it in my pot with a good amount of onions. So the beginning is really easy. I am going to put in the onions, which I've chopped up. I do not use any fat, just onions in a pot. Now, this is an enamel pot, and I think that works best. I worry that in a stainless steel pot that might stick, so this is an enamel pot. Certainly an enamel Dutch oven would work really well too. If you do have only stainless steel pots, just make sure, you might need to add a little bit of fat in there just so the onions don't stick, but they will do fine in this enamel pot. I'm going to turn it on about medium, and I'm just going to let these sweat a bit. While my onions are starting to sweat and brown, I'm going to prepare my stew beef. Now, this packaging is because we buy our beef by the half a cow, which I split with my grown son and his family. So I guess we get a quarter of a cow. And this is the way it comes packaged. I've been letting it thaw on the counter. I don't think it's fully thawed, which is okay. There we go, about a pound of stew beef. Now, even though it's not fully thawed, it will once it's in the pot. I am going to start covering it liberally with this spice mix. You can see the onions are turning a bit translucent now, a little bit brown. This is a good time to add our meat. Now, because I didn't fully thaw this, it doesn't even matter if it goes in thawed, although I'm going to see if it'll break into a bit of smaller pieces. And I am going to season it some more liberally. And now I'm just going to let that all brown together. So as it's been cooking, I've been able to break apart the pieces of stew beef, because even though I was thawing the stew beef on my counter, I guess my house is so cold it doesn't really thaw that well. Anyway, before I turn them over to brown them, I'm going to add some of the spice to the edges that were inside originally. There, now I think that'll be enough spice for it. You can always use less, but it's not a hot spice. This is a sweet paprika, a little bit of cayenne. So now I'm just going to let this finish browning. Now you can see that all the meat is nicely browned. You don't have to worry about it being cooked through, because it's going to cook through while it simmers. You just want it all nicely browned before you add the water. Now, to the water, you can see I've added 3 bay leaves for flavor. I leave them whole because I'm going to take them out again later. So I just want enough water in here to cover the meat, and then I'm going to turn it down to low and just let it simmer. Doesn't matter how much water you add, because you'll be topping it up from time to time. The important thing to do now as it simmers is to just check on it from time to time to make sure all the water hasn't evaporated. So you're going to add more water. Keep it about that deep, and then in the end you'll probably add more to make your gravy anyway. So the level of water doesn't matter as long as it's not really high in the pot. So now I'm going to put the lid on, turn it down to low, and that is just going to cook away on its own for about an hour or 2 even. So I can see that it's done. The meat is soft. So now the first thing I'm going to do is take out the bay leaves. And then I'm going to add water up to the level I want my gravy. I think that'll be good. Now, to add a little more flavor to the gravy, you can add about a tablespoon of beef bouillon, or add a beef bouillon cube. Add a little more water to that. And then I'm going to thicken it with just some flour and water mixed together. There, that is thickened up nicely with some heat. That part is actually ready. Now, sometimes I add in some mushrooms, a drained can of mushrooms, but my one daughter doesn't like them, so I'm not going to put them in tonight, but that's really nice too. So now I just need to boil up some potatoes to make some mashed potatoes, and we'll be ready to eat some Hungarian goulash. So there you go, all ready. My Oma's Hungarian goulash, the perfect meal for a cold and dark, windy night. I hope you give it a try. Bye for now.